Michigan had an opportunity to do the funniest thing, and wouldn't you know it, the Wolverines have a sense of humor. They went into Columbus in a year that everyone said it was completely impossible. Michigan's a 3-score underdog. Those who said that, outside of me, who said that, oh, yeah, they could, but they're not going to, and all of those types of things. Well, guess what? Michigan went into Columbus and beat the number 2 Ohio State Buckeyes 13-10, and Ohio State no longer will be in the Big Ten championship game. Their dreams aren't necessarily dead, but they're on life support. Everyone's turning against Ryan Day, and it was about as amazing as you can get. Let's talk about it on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Sunday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group, and I was on the ground in Columbus yesterday, which means, yes, we will talk about the pandemonium that happened in the postgame, my thoughts on that, all of it. Well, let's start off with the game. And we'll get to kind of a little bit of what I said through the week last week, which I was just mocked and scoffed, and the Ohio State people were just like really coming after me. Some of the Michigan people were coming after me because they were just like, how dare you give us hope? And, you're just being a homer and everything. Listen, they play games for a reason. I'm trying to, and as we approach a game like that, whether Michigan gets blown out or not, I'm going to tell you what the path is to victory. Sometimes it's like it takes a perfect storm. Yesterday, it might have been that perfect storm. The game went about as I expected it to. And it's just absolutely incredible that they got it done. Stellar coaching from the Michigan coaching staff from top to bottom. Give your flowers to Wink Martindale, because that dude came out and coached a gem. I mean, Michigan held only what? They didn't hold any team to, I got to back on my browser window just to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn. They did not hold any single team to 0 points throughout the year. But you look at what they gave up throughout the season. Up until this point, the best defensive performance came against Northwestern. The second best came against Fresno State. And then suddenly you're playing Ohio State, and Ohio State can only put up the same amount of points that Fresno State. Holding the Buckeyes scoreless in the second half, even better than in 2022. For all of the talk of like the greatest team ever, which, I mean, it could have been subterfuge by Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel, all those types of people, but the media went along with it. And then Ohio State fan base went along with it. And I tried to get y'all to see reason that this was not the best Ohio State team ever assembled, right? Like I tried to tell you, like you look at the 2021, you look at 2019, 2020. Justin Fields and all these receivers, and you had a defense in 2019. You had a defense in 2020. 2021, you still had a pretty good defense. It just wasn't as good as you thought it was. Now, that defense that Ohio State had, pretty dang good, but Michigan still managed to outscore them. Michigan's defense just unbelievable. When you think about the fact that Ohio State got the ball due to the turnover, the first turnover by Davis Warren, right? They're marching. We're not marching down. They're trying to get out of their own end zone, basically. And he throws a pick to Caleb Downs, and Caleb Downs had to be feeling like maybe it's finally my turn after I lost to Michigan on Jan 1. But they get the ball at the 16 and don't score. They go 3 and out there, in part because they try to run the ball to the chorus of boos at Ohio Stadium. And it's just absolutely amazing that they had that happen. Multiple times Ohio State got in the red zone and came away with nothing. Nathan Fielding, bad day for him. Michigan fans, be very thankful you have Dominic Zavada, that your kicking game tends to always be really good. But that also kind of shows that Ohio State just was unable, Ryan Day, unable to go for the jugular. I want to mention one thing that I think is crazy. Absolutely insane. If you're to look at Ohio State's longest passing play, it's 24 yards in what ended up being essentially a screen to Travion Henderson. Hit him in the flat. and he's off to the races. That's the best they had. You look at the longs. Emeka Egbuka had one for 18. Jeremiah Smith for 10. Carnell Tate for 13. I bring that up because you know what Michigan's defense didn't allow was a single long pass that you're accustomed to seeing Ohio State doing. What's more, really, there were no long pass attempts by Ohio State. They had one longish pass attempt, the attempted touchdown throw to Jeremiah Smith in the end zone. But that one didn't register right. It was really good coverage by, I think, Zeke Berry on that one. But otherwise, there was no deep shots because that really wasn't a deep shot. There were no attempts to go deep, no attempts to we understand the pressure that's coming. We got to roll the pocket out and then just try to send one of the guys, whether it's Smith or it's Tate or Egbuka, send them one-on-one and just give them an opportunity to go for it. Ohio State went 100% against type. And that is what Michigan needed, right? Remember earlier in the week, I talked about the fact that Michigan had to get Ryan Day to feel uncomfortable so that he could go away from his game plan. He is, as I was talking to Cleveland.com, Stephen Means, after the game, and he had a really astute observation in where he said Ryan Day is still trying to win the 2021 version of the game. And I've been talking about how he continues to trying to transform his team into some kind of medley of what Ohio State has been and how Michigan's been the last couple of years. And it just isn't working. And that continues to be the case, right? He's trying to run the ball up the middle constantly. They had 26 rushing attempts for 77 yards as an average of 3 yards per carry. The longest was Quinshon Judkins, which set up the touchdown, if memory serves. In which, that touchdown, you very well could have called that OPI, right? But I kind of expected that to go the way it did. Michigan goes up 10-3, and then they come and tie the game up, with basically no time left in the first half, and then they get the ball back. The storm that I thought Michigan was going to have to weather in the second half to start it out, I mean, there was kind of a storm, but it was kind of more just it was a light, cloudy day, essentially, and Michigan just had to... why did we bring these umbrellas? I mean, they started to drive the field and then they stalled out because just, again, the offensive play calling by Ohio State was just absolutely perplexing. And Michigan found a way to get it done. It wasn't because it was mistake free. If you would have told me what I'm about to tell you right now and said Michigan was going to win the game, I'd be a little bit perplexed. Davis Warren, 9 of 16 for 62 yards, a QBR of 35.9, 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. You showed me the rushing totals. Yeah, I might believe you, but that's really tells the game. But the fact that you got really great punts, I think it was a career long by Tommy Doman, a 62-yard punt, just an absolute beast of a punt. He was stellar the entire day. There was not a point where you were like, man, Tommy Doman screws Michigan again, right? He was absolutely stellar. Dominic Zavada coming in and hitting 2 clutch field goals when their guy couldn't do that. Davis Warren completing some really clutch third downs. Only 9 completed passes. Only 2 targets had more than one pass. But Donovan Edwards had 2 catches for 2 yards, not lighting anything on fire. Marlon Klein 3 for 13, also not lighting anything on fire. This game goes a lot differently, I think, if Colston Loveland plays in terms of the offense. Michigan might have won going away because it became clear from the jump that they were just going to be better in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And Ohio State never figured out a way to test the perimeter because it didn't try. And that's the thing that just is absolutely mind-boggling. It's amazing that Michigan goes down into Columbus, of all places, without arguably its 2 best players on either side of the ball in Colston Loveland and Will Johnson, and still manages to win. They did the same thing in 2022. They go down, basically, they got a little bit they ran 2 plays with Blake Corum. They ran a couple plays with Mike Moe, and they still come away with the win. This is just not what you would have expected, and it just shows you how much Michigan is in Ryan Day's head that he puckered so much. I told you that if Michigan could get out of halftime with something of a normal just kind of tie score or down 1 possession, and then carry that into the fourth quarter, that they were probably going to win the game. The game just went better than I expected from Michigan in pretty much all fronts. Maybe not moving the football. Certainly they had their mistakes. Davis Warren with the 2 picks. one in the end zone, that's like that was really difficult to take. But in a way, I think that kind of worked out best, because if they go up 17-10, I think Ohio State starts trying to, move fast. And that was what was kind of having success against Michigan. When they started going tempo, Michigan really struggled. But then they decided, no, we want to beat Michigan at its own game, because that's the type of thing that Jim Harbaugh used to always do. And yet they just cannot do it. It is absolutely insane. But it's just credit to Sherrone Moore, credit to Kirk Campbell. I know it was anemic offensive performance, but got the run going enough. It was absolutely masterful. JB Brown even. I mean, like, they didn't give up any crazy returns or anything like that. And you could just see the confidence in Michigan. And even at halftime, I was standing in the Ohio State tunnel as they came off. They looked perplexed. And the crowd never got into it, by the way. I've been there when the crowd gets into it. 2018, they scored the first touchdown. Even though they were underdogs, man, the crowd went nuts. This game, opening drive, Ohio State drives the field, he gets a field goal, nothing. It's just like, golf claps. Let's talk about the post game. And then after that, we're gonna pull some receipts on my own self just for the posterity of it all. So we're gonna do that here in just a moment. Still somewhat in disbelief. It just didn't seem real, but at the same time, after drive one on each side of the ball, I was like, I think Michigan's going to win this game. I mean, things could change, but it just felt like, okay, Ohio State, it's the same thing. And Ryan Day looking perplexed. I mean, that just became an ordeal, right? Like, even afterwards, you see Ryan Day on camera as pandemonium is happening around him. He's staring off in the distance, blank-faced, and someone crosses his path, crosses his face, and ignores him, and he just says, "What happened?" Like, the dude cannot meet the moment. For all of the talk of James Franklin just finding a way to muck things up late in games, like, James Franklin's at least trying, and then you're just like, well, that was a weird play call. Ryan Day just does stuff that just makes you kind of like, the dude just doesn't know what's happening. And it became very clear in the aftermath, the post game. Sherrone Moore getting into the middle of everything, trying to separate the players, trying to hold back even Mason Graham as he's kind of antagonizing Jack Sawyer, who's saying, your season's over, and trying to hold back tears. Please don't tell the newspaper that I got mad. Right? Like, and Ryan Day's just like kind of like standing off in the distance watching all of this. Unaware that I'm not saying there is or isn't, but there obviously probably could and maybe should be player suspensions for Ohio State for the way everything went down after the game, and which could absolutely torpedo the ability for them to go and compete in the playoff. They are still probably in the playoff. I mean, you lose to unranked Michigan. I'm seeing like they're projected at like number 6 seed or something like that. I think it should be much lower after that. But nonetheless, I'm not a decision maker in that room. But it'll be interesting to see what the committee does with that going into championship week this week. But yeah, it's just looking emotionless or just dejected, I guess, and just completely unaware of how he got here for the 4th straight year. And for all of this talk of, again, my friend Dave Biddle, but like the rent is due, the bill is due. I posted this on Instagram with some of my pictures. I said, you don't pay rent if you already own the house. That's where Michigan is right now. All of the Connor Stallions, the snow and the flu and 5 plays. We have worked for 365 days in the dark while they sat there and talked. All of that out the window. You guys, as in Ohio State, you have a Michigan problem, and you hate to see it, but more than that, you love to see it. And speaking of hate to see it, I mean, those were words that were uttered by some of my friends in Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt. I'm kind of perplexed. Again, I want to remind you, and I know it sounds weird to say this if you watched the broadcast, which I did when I got home. Gus Johnson is a Michigan fan. I know it doesn't sound like it on there. And the disgust afterwards is kind of odd to me. But like, I talked to Gus yesterday, and he's very excited about Bryce Underwood coming and all that. But just the kind of the pearl clutching at the end, and no one really clutched pearls when Oregon and Texas both planted flags in the middle of Michigan Stadium. I have no problem with that, right? Like Michigan can, if they want to stop that, then they can do their talking on the field. And there's all these. It's always the Michigan State people, right? They feel like like they're enabled defenders, the White Knights, to come out and defend the Buckeyes from the mean Wolverines. To say, they point out like oh, there's these things keep on happening, and the common denominator is Michigan. Well, no, as people have pointed out, the common denominator is Michigan winning, not that, right? Like they show the tunnel, and then they show the post game of the Michigan State game, and then they show this. What is the common denominator? Well, the losing team started trying to fight Michigan players after it all. Okay? We've seen Michigan have self-control when other teams plant flags on their stadium turf after Michigan has lost, and there's been no columns of clutching pearls or anything of that nature. What there was this time, however, was the fact that Michigan's planting the flag. They're celebrating. They have every right to do that, okay? They're not damaging the turf or anything like that. They're just think about it in terms of what it is. They took a flag because they just, hey, we just took over your stadium. They did that, pull it down. They did that, taking it and just sticking it in there, right? There were no fights that happened in 2022. There was no fights when Baker Mayfield did it. And here's what I saw. I was a little bit behind them, right? I was still kind of walking up from the north end zone when the flag passed me. I didn't even notice it until it was almost getting to center field, right? To the O. And so I start running, cameras in tow. I've got a giant camera with a monopod, and I'm running, and I'm trying to get to the left side, and then trying to assess where can I get a picture of them in front of the flag like I did last year or 2022. I get up there, and not too soon after I get there, I just see a sea of red coming. And those suicide mosh pits where it's like they clear the floor, and then both sides just rush at each other at a certain point when the breakdown drops. And I'm talking metal music here. But it was like that, except for only one side rushed and the other one stood still. And then, of course, Michigan started defending itself. I saw all the things that Ohio State, Michigan State, people like to claim that Kalel Mullings was doing. I saw not any female assistance, but I saw some stomping and some stuff like that going on. And for the most part, not all, most part, I saw Michigan guys trying to end it while Ohio State guys were trying to get in. Now, there were some Michigan guys that once the Ohio State guys got engaged, they were going to try to pick things up that much more, okay? So as I come around to the side, that's when I start seeing Ohio State troopers trying to come after some Michigan players that are nowhere near any of the action. They're shoving them. They're screaming expletives at them. And the Michigan players are pleading, like, why are you doing this to us? We aren't even over there. We're not even getting involved in that. And they just kept on screaming expletives at them and shoving them. And then before long, I see Josiah Stewart sitting on the ground, his eyes completely closed shut, swollen, looks like tears are streaming down. I'm like, oh man, they're getting pepper sprayed. I see Tristan Bounds. I see a couple other guys that I don't really have a quick recall of who it was. Then I run into one of my colleagues from BCSN. He's a Florida grad, but he works in Toledo covering Michigan and Ohio State. And one of his eyes is swollen shut, and he's like, I got maced, I got pepper sprayed. I go off to the more to the side, and I see Sam, my guy, Sam Popper, director of recruiting. His eyes are not swollen shut, but they're big and red and puffy. And he's like, I got maced, but you know what? I don't care. And then as I'm over there, then I start seeing like Rayshawn Benny running behind Michigan's bench, or nothing's happening, and all of a sudden I don't even know where it came from. Was it Ohio State players or staffers? I don't know, but I started seeing skirmishes happening over there. I head back over to into the middle of the field, and they're still just can't quite separate it as the cops are starting to put bikes out and everything like that and separate things. But that's where I see cops are really just kind of, there's an element of some trying to keep the peace, and others, I think, escalated the situation further. It was not a good scenario. Meanwhile, I see the Michigan coaches trying to separate things. I see Ohio State people. I don't know if they're coaches. I don't know what they all look like, right? I see Ohio State people escalating things. By the way, credit to Jason Avant for getting the flag back from Davis and Igbinosun, man. That was heroism, right? they're defending their honor. Well, you defend your honor, because the fact that this got blown up into something, I know that depending on the side you're on, you love what you saw. But I would hate, honestly, if Michigan, when they saw Texas or Oregon doing it, if they went and did this, because I'd say, where was this fight during the game? Right? Michigan went out and they were the aggressor. The 6-5 team became a 7-5 team. The 10-1 team became 10-2. Lost all rights to the Big Ten championship and all of that, and lost all right to really say anything to Michigan. They just cannot handle. And you can tell if you go back and you watch Ryan Day's skull session before the game. The things that he's saying are pretty clear. That it's the same type of thing you saw from Brian Hartline. Like, we worked, like, Ryan Day is like, this is about our integrity. This is about our toughness. This is about our team. And, this isn't about them. This is about us. And it's like this, like, we are entitled to this win. We worked hard for this win, but therefore we deserve it. You don't deserve it. There's a reason why you didn't win the game, and it's largely on you. And then when all hell broke loose on your own field, you stood back watching Jack Sawyer just go nuts. And you just didn't do anything about it. What does that tell you about you? Let's get to the last part. Like I said, I wanted to pull some receipts and stuff a little bit. I just did a little quick compilation video, which I'm going to have you watch or listen to, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So we'll do that here in just a moment. All right, let's finish up. By the way, decked out in home field today. Rose Bowl hat, home field bomber jacket, home field hoodie, undefeated. Feeling it today. I have gone from being completely neutral. And if Michigan would have lost yesterday, I mean, I know a lot of people would have had meltdowns. I would have been like, I was just in a happy, peaceful, joy of the Lord type of day. Nothing was going to affect that for me. But at the same time, all of the anger that comes from the Ohio State side, the name calling, all that's pushing me more to actually actively root for Michigan, like I was when I was in college or when I lived in Los Angeles and all that stuff. All right, so we talked, obviously, what was the path? I said there was a path, and it didn't go exactly as I thought, but I mean, it went pretty close to exactly as I thought. Like I said, like, things that were untrue. I said, if Michigan turns the ball over once, it's not going to happen. Well, turned it over twice, even in the turnover margin, 0-0. I said that the passing game really had to work. Nope, 62 yards, didn't have to work, didn't do it. I was very curious during the game why they weren't pulling out all the stops, and they're playing ball control obviously the whole time, taking up the whole clock, not letting Ohio State have the ball. And Ohio State, you would have thought, would go hurry up, but they tried to do the same thing. It's absolutely perplexing. But nonetheless, there was a Buckeye fan account that came after me last week because of they took one little part and they took it kind of out of context. That part's included here with more context. Because I said I fully expected Ohio State to win, so I was wrong there. But guess what? I usually do pick Ohio State to win, and Michigan's won. So probably not best to change. But nonetheless, they were calling me a clown, all these people in the comments, like, this guy's such an idiot, and like they're just giving anyone a podcast. This guy's factually wrong about Ohio State. Not, this isn't, I said it wasn't the best. I said it's one of the worst Ohio State teams they've had in a while. Well, Kyle McCord went out and just tossed the ball around like a madman for Syracuse against Miami. And they probably would have liked to have had Kyle McCord over what they got from Will Howard yesterday, right? Kyle McCord played much better against what you would think to be a better Michigan defense with Will Johnson than Will Howard did in this one. So enjoy. I'm just going to give you a 5 minutes of some of what we went through together. I am not saying I think Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. I think the opposite of that, to be honest. But I will say I left the press conference today being like, so you're saying there's a chance? And there is. Michigan's going to have to play a perfect game. It's going to have to pull some rabbits out of some hats. It's going to have to force some mistakes. It's going to need Ryan Day to pucker up a little bit. But there is a path for Michigan to be able to win the game. So instead of just delaying, what are some of those things? Well, Ohio State is a team that does not necessarily start that fast most of the time. You just kind of have to Iowa this game up to some degree if Michigan's going to stand a chance. It is not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think that there is a path. And also just like from mentality standpoint, right? Because if you are Ryan Day and things are tight late, you might make some decisions that you might not make in other games. If you're Sherrone Moore and you playing with house money, kind of the same thing for Michigan. If Michigan wins this, we'll look back at this season and be like, man, it was really fun going to the Rose Bowl, the national championship game, but it was also really fun to beat Ohio State in a year when it just did not feel like there even was a chance. That said, despite I'm looking at this screen here with ESPN, SP Plus, Ohio State's the number one team here. These are just advanced analytics that are a little bit projective in nature. I still don't believe that this is the best Ohio State team we've seen in a lot of ways. I think this might be the worst Ohio State team we've seen in a very long time. That said, I mean, there's a lot more parity in college football, and they absolutely could win a national championship because there isn't like the elite team this year. But I think that certainly I would much rather face this team than even last year's team in a lot of ways with Marvin Harrison. Yeah, Jeremiah Smith is daunting, but Marvin Harrison was more daunting. And, Kyle McCord, Will Howard has played better than Kyle McCord, I think, but Kyle McCord was no slouch. Heck, rather face this team than 21 or 22, and Michigan won both those games. So you just got to go in and Iowa things up, make it uncomfortable. There have been moments where they have looked very vulnerable, and there's places where we've seen in previous iterations of the game where Ohio State has been, we didn't know they were vulnerable until you saw them against me. Right now, it's like, okay, you're facing Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and the rest of the D-line. Good luck. And hopefully they play up to what they're able to. You just kind of hope that that the nerves kind of affect Ohio State to some degree, because that's one of the things that Davis Warren was talking about yesterday is just that you don't want to get too high, you don't want to get too low, right? Like it's this idea of like you have to be emotionally kind of centered going into a game like this, and I think that's absolutely important, right? Like you got to play like your hair's on fire and leave it all out there, but not do too much. Not get too high, not get too low, and just kind of fight every down. And that was exactly the type of thing that Davis Warren said. So I'm very curious and interested to see kind of how that looks. That said, I mean, we've seen stellar Wink Martindale recently. It always takes people a little bit of time to catch up, but obviously, not allowing a touchdown in 6 quarters. I think that like we've seen a lot of good from Wink, and I would imagine Wink's really been watching Ryan Day. And obviously, Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator, he's been in the NFL. He's gone. I'm going to have to look this up. Has he faced a Wink Martindale defense? I would bet he has. Didn't go well for Sark in the NFL. Went great for Sark in college. But I think that Wink had to learn some lessons about college, and I think he's mostly learned them. So I'm curious to see how he deploys things. Because if I'm Ohio State, I don't really want to get away from my identity, right? Because I think that's been kind of part of the problem. Right, they didn't lose in 2021 because they couldn't throw the ball all over. They were able to, but Michigan was just able to, get off the field on third downs. They're sitting there looking at the records. There might be some kind of like inner belief that like, yeah, we should just be able to come in and do what we do, and we should be good. And like that may or may not be the case. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying like that's a possibility. And if you're Michigan, you hope that they're coming in with that, and that Michigan's coming in with this, like, listen, we've won the last 3. We're just going to do it again. Like, and when I say run the ball, I should add run the ball effectively, because it's like, oh yeah, they ran the ball 40 times, but they averaged like 2 yards per carry. That doesn't really help, right? So run the ball effectively is the most important thing. Keeping the ball away from Ohio State, managing the game. Michigan's path is likely relies more heavily on being able to run the ball effectively. So that would be it. Isn't that just, it's a marvelous thing to be right? But there's more stuff. If I would have pulled from the podcast from the day before the game, a lot more correct insight there. But the Ryan Day puckering part, that's the big thing. Saying that back on Monday, and that ended up being the case. Huge for Michigan, and now it's like I still question, do you want them to get rid of Ryan Day and then start like kind of going through their 40 years in the wilderness phase? Ohio State hasn't had a series of down years since, early Woody Hayes. We're talking 1950s, people. It's been a long track record for the Buckeyes, the only program that's really done that. So part of it is like, yeah, just keep them, but they're going to contend for stuff, but lose to Michigan. But, so pick your poison. Do you want what you know that you got? They're still going to contend for stuff, but they'll lose to lose to Michigan. Or they can not contend for stuff, go through a dark period for a minute for the first time ever. I kind of want the latter, but you kind of go with the, for lack of a better term, use the idiom, you go with the devil you know. So that's kind of exciting. The great thing about this overall for Michigan, from the Michigan perspective, is that this season is a success. Would you have liked it to have been better? Absolutely, in some ways. But the way that I look at it is Michigan would not have gotten it. Like, this is just a perfect storm. If Michigan was 2 games better, say they beat Washington and Illinois, does Jolin Ellison come forward and say, I need to make sure that Michigan gets Bryce Underwood? Is Michigan going to make the requisite changes? Michigan was already trying to go after Bryce, but would they have been financially competitive enough with the donors they had? With the desperation that started to become bred with the way the season went, would Michigan be in the position to completely overhaul things to look towards the future? Because now you're looking potentially at a Michigan future that is significantly brighter, maybe even more so than the last 3 years. So without some struggle, you don't get there. You don't get the introspection that was, I think, necessary from the coaches to get to this point where they're able to beat Ohio State necessarily, right? To be able to outcoach everybody on that side, Chip Kelly included, right? So it's absolutely imperative, I think, that Michigan went through it. I think sometimes you have to go through some bad to get to the good. That's how you grow. And I think that's where Michigan, for the future's sake, got what it needed. It needed a swift kick, and it got it. Thus, Bryce Underwood flips. Future looking bright, especially as they finish out recruiting. But then on the other side, they still beat the 2 rivals, MSU and Ohio State. And this has to, in a lot of ways, I know some people will say this is the best win of the rivalry. In terms of impressiveness and impressiveness for Michigan and embarrassment for Ohio State, 100%. In terms of ones that would be my favorite, no, 2021 and 2022 are probably those. But give Michigan their flowers, man. They found a way to get it done. People in Columbus are apoplectic. And when I start seeing comeback, like people, the Ohio State fans trying to be like, we're going to the playoffs and you're not. I saw one person have a comeback saying like, all right, good luck with that. So, it's everything you want and everything you need. I think that's the thing. Or maybe not everything you want, but it's everything you need. I think that's the better way to say it. All right, we'll be back Monday. We're going to continue talking about the game. We've got plenty more to talk about. We'll start turning our eyes to recruiting as early signing day comes up on Wednesday. Obviously, we're going to have some basketball. We're going to look forward to the transfer portal, all kinds of stuff. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon. Peace.